Welcome to this episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today is Jimmy from WHYnot Results, and he's going to talk to us about the crap no one tells you about the evolution of video marketing. So, welcome, Jimmy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, let's just dive right in. We don't really beat around the bush here. So,
I like
what
that.
is some crap no one tells you about video marketing or the evolution thereof?
Well, it's interesting. I'd say it depends on who you ask. So, when we, in my opinion, when we look at the evolution, video has come and is still it, the speed that it's being developed in the quality of what you can do and accessibility and editing and everything is moving so much faster than so many other technologies in today's world, because of the demand for it. You think about the quality of what I can do and all the cool things I can do with this,
Yeah, just on an iPhone.
and even the quality of this compared to a couple generations before.
Mhm.
That really wasn't that long ago. But I can record in 4K. I can do all these, I can do 3D imaging. I can do all these super cool things that,
O
you know,
on a $900 device that you can carry
that's
around in
right.
your pocket,
That's
right?
right. Yeah. And it's
So
not that expensive.
right. So you started I know a little bit about, your backstory, right? So you've been involved with marketing and video marketing, for a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I started at where my marketing background began. So I originally went to school for finance. So not normally somewhere,
Oh,
but
so it started there.
definitely not. Um, and in 2010, being a stockbroker, soon decided that wasn't something I wanted to do. But the people were pretty angry at that industry at the time.
Yep.
And I was just out of college and decided I had worked for another company before, and one of my sales managers at that company had gone to work for this little company at the time called Infusionsoft, and it was a little
Little company at the time.
at the time, yeah,
Okay.
little software startup, that had about 60 or 70 employees, at that time, and I was going to be one of the handful of sales guys. So I went there, and I soon learned that if you've ever used that software, it's incredibly complicated, very complex.
Yes.
Um,
It does a lot too. Like,
it does.
it
It's
was a
incredible. It's incredibly powerful, but in
yes.
order to get that power, there's a lot of complexity involved.
Yes.
And so, in order to effectively sell that to small businesses, you're selling a very techie item to a non-techie crowd.
Mhm.
And in order to do that, I had to learn about online and digital marketing.
Okay.
And a major component of that I've always been in favor of because I like it the most has been video,
Right.
which is what led. So I was there for about 10 years, and I worked for another software company, called Chime Technologies, that does CRM and marketing automation in the real estate specific field.
Okay.
And then I partnered with my partner here, Mario, to build and develop Why Not Results. So, um,
So where along the line, I mean, you used video in Infusionsoft, right?
all the time.
So what was that production process like compared to what it is now?
Well, so we had an in-house studio there.
Okay.
There's and again, we're going back a few years, but really not that long in the
Right.
grand scheme of things.
And that's the thing. Like, even if you're talking 8 years ago, right?
Night and day, night and day difference.
Right.
Yeah, and
So
and so.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so really, we started originally a lot of our video, you could say, at the getting going in the early years was webinars,
Mhm.
right? Just screen shares, no camera on the person, just they're looking at a slide deck or at your screen if you're showing software or whatever. But we do a lot of live webinars, and that was actually something my transition from sales into marketing, because I was in sales about half the time I was there, transitioned into marketing. And I think they transitioned me as much as anything because they were tired of me complaining about how I felt like the marketing material was not applicable to our ideal customer, our
Uh-huh.
ideal client. And so they said, "Well, let's go ahead and you think you can do it better." And I did from a results standpoint. But one of the first programs I took over was our webinar and live demo. So group one to many sales and education and education to tee up the sale uh, to our clients. And so that was my first, from a professional standpoint, exposure to video. And it was interesting, even getting started then, to manage a webinar. I always had to have another person on there with me, a guest speaker,
Right.
just because I find myself getting exhausted and need to pass it off to someone to have some color commentary, and then I could go again. That's just presentation skills, I
Yep.
suppose,
That's
as they're developing, and then also one or two people managing the chat, because we could max out a go to webinar at 1,000 people, and we did
right.
that not all the time, but
So it was a pretty large production, so to speak.
yeah, yeah, it was.
So how did you transition from that into more of this video? Because I mean, you now have you have studios, I want to say,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, so,
too.
so like how did you get to that point, and what has changed as far as how you do things from back then to where you are now?
Well, one of the things that I consider myself very fortunate as having is in working there. Most of our largest affiliates and partners were, in my opinion, some of the most innovative marketers in the world. So guys like Ryan Dice and Dave Ramsey and Damon John and these guys, they're all affiliates of ours.
Yep.
And so when I was what I did when I was in sales still is I would just follow all these guys and watch what they were doing, and then try to use that in my conversations. But then when I transitioned to marketing, I actually had the opportunity to work with a lot of their teams, and seeing the effect that I think it's important to humanize any brand. And I
Yep.
think video does that in a more effective way to make an actual connection with people than anything else. Because you take, whether you're, and it's definitely relevant if you're something like a software company, but
Right.
even if you're a local insurance person or a local, um, i- i- any local business, putting a face behind the brand. Your brand isn't your logo.
Correct. That's the tiny thing that people see, right? And
That's
like
right.
I always tell people, as an example, like, how often do people say, I love a piece of clothing, right? Very rarely. But how often do they say, oh, I love my Nike stuff,
Right.
right? Like,
Exactly.
it's not a specific item. You could get them anything from Nike and they'll love it, right? Part of that is the perception, right? But it's also because the brand was created. It's the promise of the quality, everything else that comes with it.
Promise of the quality, the lifestyle, the everything
Yeah.
that is portrayed in the way that they market.
And that, I think, is what video has done a really, really good job with as far as the evolution goes. Is, I remember, you don't even have to go, let's go back, I don't know, call it 4 years. Most companies were making videos that were called commercials, right?
Yeah.
Like, that was the video companies would make.
And it was commercials or long form, you know,
Right.
like the longer version of this,
Yes.
and that's it.
Right.
And those were uh, businesses that were at the forefront of things, were creating long form.
Yes.
Many still
Now,
don't.
yeah. Now, like you said, like with the device you have in your pocket, any small business owner, any individual, doesn't even have to be a business, can start making content, can start making videos that are quality enough to put out line to build a business on, right?
And that's what's interesting to me is in the bucket of clients that I have, I actually have very few anymore that I even try to have come in and record with us,
Mhm.
because they can record content that's good enough for what's needed, you know, especially when we're talking about social media videos, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It
Like
only has
like
to
this
be
like the short
so good.
format stuff, right?
short format stuff. They can record stuff that's good enough wherever they're at,
Mhm.
and then my team can manipulate it and make things. So a lot of my clients now record all their own stuff, submit it to our team, and then they do stuff with it from there.
And I think that's part of what a lot of people are missing from this is they think they have to do all of it themselves, right? And it, recording the video and having a final file are two different things, right? So
Yeah, it's true.
right? It's you have to take it through multiple steps. Like I always tell people the recording's the easy part. Like you can do that in a parking lot outside Target. Like I don't care, right?
Yep.
You can record it anywhere. It's
Y-
the post production that really delivers on the final quality, right? And we were talking about, how, let's say, 5 or 7 years ago, you would have needed a 4K camera, right? Like $3,000 camera to record decent
Yeah,
video, decent
and a
audio.
$1,000 mic and
Correct, right?
$100 for the lights.
Now we're looking at, you have a $900 iPhone. You can have a wireless mic that you pick off of Amazon for, I don't know, $40, whatever it is, a $69 tripod, and any place in the world is a studio now,
That's right.
right?
It's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, it kind of is, right? But what's so fascinating is that I think people in general are so far behind on what the technology they already have access to today can actually do, because we're so stuck in the, well, no, but I need to go buy the nice camera. Oh, I need to pay for the software. I need to, and I'm like, no, pull out your
You
phone,
don't.
download CapCut, not
Yeah,
sponsored by CapCut. Um, and you can produce medium content, right? Like that's good enough for most.
yeah, yeah. Another cool one for phone use is Vlog Easy. That's one that I've had clients use before because it'll automatically jump cut, so you can just sit there and talk into it while you're walking or doing whatever,
Like,
and it'll automatically pull all your jump cuts through.
so how acceptable were jump cuts 5 years ago, right? If we just talk about stuff like that. And if people don't know what a jump cut is, it's when you, if someone is talking and they go, you cut that out and splice it together, right?
It trims the fat out of your video.
Correct. Um, Previously in the video industry, that was a no-go, right? You only could eliminate the really obvious ones, but you couldn't eliminate a lot of silences. Well, with the introduction of TikTok, eh, pretty much anything goes, right?
That's well, I mean, I what I do when I record a lot of my TikTok videos is I don't try to make it look like it's not a jump cut. I'm actually intentionally changing my background between cuts and changing the viewpoint and things like that because what's been found is just that holds people's attention so much better than having I talk much slower than I appear to talk on TikTok.
Yeah. So I just full disclosure here, that's actually where we connected initially. I saw one of your videos and I was like, oh, this guy seems fascinating. So let me reach out. But it was funny because the very first time I talked to you, and I'm like, I thought he would talk faster. Right. But it's the dissolution of jump cuts, right? Is
I'm recording it a sentence at a time.
right, which is actually a pretty brilliant way to do it.
It makes it easy for someone who doesn't naturally talk very fast. Is not always. I'm kind of monotone naturally, and I'm not always as eloquent, especially when I go on and on. And so when I can do it in second, and you know, here's 4 tips to improve your social media marketing videos.
Right. And
Like
then you can just record one tip at a time,
that's
right?
right. That's right.
Um, so if someone, let's say someone was thinking about getting into your industry, not getting into video marketing, but specifically what it is that you do, like running a studio, you guys have multiple editors, you have like, you're a production company, I call it, right?
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, we have currently we've got a handful of people here in Arizona where I'm at, and then we have a team of video editors and graphic designers and programmers in one location, and then we have another team of just fulfillment people because we do a lot of posting on social media and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Um, and we have another team of fulfillment people at our other studio, which is about 3 hours south of me in Mexico, and they that just work through fulfillment and getting dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's.
So
But it equals a total of over 30 people.
right.
Um,
So that brings up two questions. First of all, the misconception that people have to be near each other to work on video, right? With the tools that are available, like you can have an editor pretty much anywhere, right?
Yeah, and yeah, and to interface with our editors and stuff, we use a combination of G Drive in some cases, but we also have something called Team Viewer, and we have a
Mhm.
dedicated VA computer here locally that we.
Right. So there's all this technology to make it easy. But if someone wanted to get into your industry today, where would you tell them to start? Like if I wanted to one day own a video production company or work within one, like what's the skill set that is really needed to do it?
I think initially it's understanding what is from a. Well, I'm not even going to get into video. Actually, I'd say being able to one make people feel comfortable
Okay.
who you're recording with. That's the number. I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge in working with recording with clients, um, is making the talent feel comfortable and working with them to be able to a lot of time make their message more concise, make it more compelling. I'd say those types of soft skills, like we talked about, the technology is to a point where it's not incredibly difficult to record something that either is good enough that an editor can run with it, or it's yeah, it's not technology does a lot of the work for you
Hmm.
in today's day and age. And so I think where you're valuable to your clients is being able to help them deliver their message in the most effective way possible that's going to encompass whatever their overarching goal is for what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's for a social media campaign or it's for specifically an ad campaign or whatever.
Yeah. So I have because normally we don't do the podcast remotely. Normally people come here and we do it. And it's funny because kind of what you're to the alluding to what you're saying is uh, almost everyone that comes on the podcast, I call it the 7-minute mark, right? They sit down, the cameras are set up, there's a microphone shoved in their face, and they're like, sitting up tight. And it almost always around the 7-minute mark is when they realize that I can just relax. We
Yeah,
can just talk like, and I can go back and look at podcasts that we've done. When I say look at podcasts, it's because they're on YouTube. And you can see the demeanor change in almost every single guest that we have on around that 5 to 7 minute mark.
yeah.
So what you're really saying is that if you want to get into video production, you need to develop your soft skills far more than necessarily your editing skills or your ability to operate a camera.
I'm not a videographer by any means, but I can, and I again, I think the reality is if you're getting into it because you're super techie and into everything, I think that those skills are going to be replaced in the very near future, by technology. A lot of that because I think the technology is coming so fast that it's making, but you can't substitute. One thing you can't fix in post production is whether or not someone's comfortable,
Right.
whether or not someone's message is the way it needs to be,
Yep.
whether or not whether they're reading a script or going back and talking like you and I. You can't fix a bad message. You
Right.
can't fix whether or not someone seems nervous and tight and everything on camera.
Right. You can
Um,
you can you can fix the technicality of things. You can't fix the actual person
that's right.
or their, well, I'm not going to say or even their voice because we can even fix that now.
Yeah, yeah. Audio can be fixed. Lighting can be fixed. All that can be taken care of.
And it's
Uh,
it's it's so weird because like we thought about getting into video content, call it, I don't know, 5 years ago. And I was absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of money that would have had to be spent, the software expertise that someone would have needed to do a lot of this editing and all that stuff. And then, here we are 5 years later. Um, and once again, I'm not recording on a cell phone, but it's not a $4,000 camera either, right? And then you have software like Descript. Descript is what, like a year old? Not sponsored by Descript. Where you are literally editing text that edits video at the same time. Like that technology 5 years ago, people would have called you insane for saying that would exist one day, right?
Yeah.
But now anybody, like you can train almost anybody to do rough editing of video or pull out clips from a video, whatever it is, because the technology is, I mean, my 6-year-old daughter could probably figure it out at this point.
Well, and it's ironic that I'm sitting in a studio that costs probably $150 to $200,000 to put together as a business owner who has that, and I'm saying that
Right.
you can record a lot of your own
What,
stuff and
let's just go with
high
this.
quality.
What are you recording this podcast on?
What am I recording it on?
Well, I'm recording it, but like, what's the
My
equipment
computer.
right? A
Yeah,
laptop. Yeah.
my MacBook.
which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? Because
Yeah,
once again, yes, they have existed for a long time, but all the supporting technology behind it has come. I mean, even the software we're using to record this episode, right? I didn't know this was even possible, but we were talking about redundancies, right? How this specific platform uses 3 or 4 different redundancies in order to make sure that we end up with a decent final product. But when you guys are out, I know you don't record a lot, right? But just like me, I'm sure you've had a moment where you went out with a camera, you went out with a microphone, and then you do the first 5 minute shoot, and then someone checks it, and you're like, there's no audio.
I've got one worse for you than that.
Okay.
I recorded for an entire day for a client where there was 2 hired talents that had come in,
Ow.
and one of the talents so we've got a big soundboard and everything
Mhm.
that everyone's mics, so that people's mics are coming through separately. One of the talents had, and it was like a 6-hour shoot. One of the talents, his entire shoot, I had unmuted the wrong we had unmuted the wrong one, and because there was so much chaos in the studio with the scripts and, yeah, everything, running multiple teleprompters and doing everything, running 3 different angles and doing, it went unnoticed.
Wow.
And so I had to call both the talents and then pay them out of our pocket to fix it for the client and everything, and get that done in a timely manner. But, I yeah, so I can redundancy. Now we run multiple every time we record in studio, we record from multiple audio points so that we always have a backup no matter what. We
Right.
record from multiple angles in case we don't like one, and just from again going back to jump cut, having it jump in with a side angle for 5 seconds and then come back to the front
Yep.
is that's very acceptable and desirable today.
Right.
But yeah, redundancy. But again, I think that's the difference where if I screw something up for a client, that's why I have to have redundancy, because then, like I said in that situation, that ended up costing me a lot of money because I had to go pay his talent again to come back in. And luckily, there were guys that I referred to him, so they were cool about
So
it.
they cut you a break.
Yeah, I refer them business, so they were cool about it. But either way, it cost me money because I still paid them to come back down and record, and then and it's the time of doing it again. Like I said, it was kind of a chaotic recording to begin
Yep.
with, just the nature of the project that we were doing,
Yeah,
and so
not
it's
everything can be planned 100%. Like people don't realize, because we record, like when I do public speaking, we record those events, right?
mhm.
And before we go, everything's planned out. We have our cameras, our setup, our mics, and all that stuff. And then, but once you're there and setting up, and people are coming up and talking to you, and hey, I need to run this by you. And then all of a sudden it's like, um, where's the primary mic?
Right.
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 But yeah, we actually had one that I did, and I do a lot of my recording myself. But one of the things that I learned the hard way is now, whenever I do a live recording, for example, I put up my cell phone and I'll put it off to the side somewhere with, like, it's not the best of the angles in the world, but
Hmm.
I will plug a mic into that and then I will hide the mic underneath.
Smart.
That has
Smart.
actually been my saving grace because we recorded an entire podcast using a live event with two cameras and a computer and a guy sitting there operating, only to find out that there was an error with the audio from the computer. And it was the computer itself, right?
Yeah.
So that stupid cell phone
Yeah.
became the saving grace because that had the audio recording on it. Was it a pain to splice it all together? Yes, but having that redundancy was absolutely life-saving in that instance.
You know what's been my new best friend from an audio recording perspective is a little thing called a Zoom mic. I don't know if you're familiar with those at all.
No.
It's a little box about yay big, and you can record actually up to 5 separate inputs on this little thing. It's just going to record it to an SD card. And as if people aren't familiar, it's very easy to marry up audio and sync it and then overlay it over whatever the camera records. So
Right.
basically we can record, so it can capture whatever the camera gets it, which is going to be garbage in most cases, just because cameras in most cases aren't built with a good quality
Correct.
mic. But then I run a boom mic from the Zoom,
Mhm.
and then I run a lapel off that also records into the Zoom on separate files. So that, again, we have the backup, we have the camera, which is what we're going to sync off of, but then we have two different ones to choose from at that point. That way, if someone
Got it.
does this, because that's been a problem in the past when we ran
Yep.
just lapels. Someone hits this, or sometimes the wires, they'll
Yep.
brush it with their arm.
Or even they'll pull
Thud.
out slightly, like, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of things that can happen.
there's tons of variables, right?
Yep.
And so we'll run a lapel that we just hardwire right into the boom as well. I'm looking up because the boom's actually above my head, but
Okay.
that's not what I'm recording on right now. But that's the pole is above my head. But what it does is it provides us a way where also the camera is taken out of the element, is that variable is to many degrees taken out. And so where most of the time we're recording from more than one angle, we have two different cameras
Mhm.
going, and but then we also have two different audios. And so again, if something happens to whichever one we decide, we got two quality audios to pick from,
Right.
no matter what.
So really the lesson is, back up your audio as much as you can. And I don't think people realize a lot of times, unless you've been in this industry, right? Unless you understand the basics of video and all that stuff, is your audio file and your video file are technically two separate files,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Are they interconnected? Yes, they lay on top of each other. But
Yeah.
you need to focus heavily on the quality of your audio because the video has pretty much become a no-brainer, right? Like, I was watching TV the other day, one of those, and now one of my guilty pleasures comes out. On Sunday mornings, I watch Food Network. Okay. That's just what I do.
There you go.
um, but they were recording one of the shows, and I couldn't help but notice they were doing like multi-camera angles, right? And my guess is they have a really good camera as the primary camera. But then you saw, like, off to the side, they were walking around with an iPhone on a gimbal,
Yep.
and then they would cut to that shot. And you could tell, obviously, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're now doing television production on an iPhone? Like,
Right?
when did this happen?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But yeah, it's just the technology has come so far. Like, and I can't even begin to explain it to people.
But one of my clients is he's a coach for professional speakers, basically. And one of his number one tips to people is like, go buy yourself a decent camera first
Mhm.
as a backup. every time you replace your phone, don't sell or throw away the old one. Now you have a secondary camera and a third camera and whatever else you need,
Oh yeah.
because you might as well. It's a piece of hardware. You're not going to get much for it if you trade it
Right.
in or sell it or whatever.
You
Anyway,
will not be able to buy a better camera
that's
for
right.
what the trade-in value is. Like,
That's right. And I think that's great advice. And the other, I guess you could call it hack that I've seen that's very effective with an old phone is, and you kind of alluded to this, is just having an audio recorder and then running your mic and running your camera or running your phone, putting
mhm,
that in your back pocket or whatever, and running a lapel mic up and being able to capture quality audio recorded separately right onto that phone that again you is worthless to you otherwise,
right.
um, but always having that as a backup. So these phones are filled with tools and everything. And again, the technology on them is incredible.
Yeah.
And so and likely is as good as anything you're going to buy for whatever that phone's worth.
So we've covered pretty much from going to multi-$100,000 studios that are, I'm not going to say becoming worthless, but um, worth less,
Worth,
right?
yeah.
Um, where do you think we're going?
I'm interested to see what happens with a lot of this AI stuff. We've dove into it to a certain degree, and I think that you're going to see more and more from an editing perspective, post production perspective, AI becoming more and more of a thing. But I mean, you're already seeing these tools that you can buy for $100 that will follow you around with your phone in it and stuff. And it's just and that's been around for a few years.
Right.
Um,
What you need to like, you had to have a guy do that
that's right.
before. Now
Yeah.
it's just like, hey, plump this on your desk and it'll follow you. Right. It's
Yeah.
like, what?
And so I'm interested to see. I think you're going to see a lot of that. You'll see AI fulfilling on more and more, and I'm interested to see what it can do from different shots, different angles. I think that having avatars and things like that more and more, I think, is going to become a thing as they become more realistic and lifelike, which is kind of scary, but it's also,
So
I think
you
it's in
pay.
the future. It's in the near enough future.
Oh yeah, I tell people all the time, you've probably read hundred of articles already that were written or co-written by AI,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
100%.
So content has already been moving that way, but you think video is the next step, that's going to
Absolutely.
become more and more AI.
Yeah, I do.
Interesting.
Which is again where
Scary.
if we were talking to someone who wants to be in this industry, that's where having the soft skills and understanding the strategies and understanding the things that are still, I think, much further out from being replaced.
Right.
That's where understanding that stuff is going to become more and more important.
So it's gonna become more of a soft skill type market than necessarily
I think
knowing
so.
how to operate a camera.
I Yeah, no matter what, understanding how to deal with people
Right. Yeah,
is
well, yeah.
always going to be your most important skill that you can have.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
And if anybody wants to check him out, it's once again, Why Not Results. And we will be back with another episode.
Thanks for having me.